The idea of going there was that we felt a lot of conflicting reports were coming out from Muzaffarnagar. Unfortunately, usually, as in the past, the media sends about 10, 5, 4 reporters to these kind of communal incident places. But this had not been done by all sections of the media this time. And given the fact that there was a quick politicization of the situation when it occurred and afterwards, all political parties were feeding the wrong kind of information to the people. So we went there and we made sure that apart from everything else that we did, we went to a refugee camp in one of the villages, not in Muzaffarnagar, but in two of the villages. We made sure that we also visited a village, Kudpa, which was the scene of a major assault and pitched battle attack on the community there. And we have come back and put together this report which we have given you. But a couple of things are very clear. One was, while the genesis of the violence, and as we all know who have covered communal violence over the decades, that there are always two dimensions to communal violence. One is the government and the administration and the ability or inability to control it, or the ability and inability to fan the fires. So one side becomes the involvement of the state government, and on the other side is the people, the conspirators, the people who conspired to create the communal violence. In Uttar Pradesh, there is a history, and every journalist who has covered the violence through the 80s, 70s, particularly in UP, will bear this out, that there's always been a history of rumors which then erupts in violence on the basis of a very, very small and in normal times insignificant incident. The three things that we did notice this time was one, that, and this is one thing that is certain, that it is for the Jat and Muslim political unity was fractured, at least in Muzaffarnagar and many adjoining regions. It is one of the first times that the violence spread within minutes from the city, from the town into the districts and into the villages. So it went into the countryside. It is also a first for this area where villager attacked the villager living in the same village. They were not mobs that came from outside. And again, it was also a shift that we have noticed in the violence, that instead of killing and killing in large numbers, though many have been killed, which we have talked about, the idea was to displace and to convert people into refugees. And after the attack, when the people fled, and in this case we have said that the majority, the overwhelming majority were that of Muslims, when they fled their villages, their houses were burnt, their little belongings looted, and they have no place to go back to. So they're all living in camps which they themselves have arranged. There was not a single government organized relief camp in that area, state government. And they were all living in wherever they could find some shelter. And all of them are terrified and traumatized and saying they can't go back for 2 or 3 reasons. One, they cannot go back because there is no place to go back to. 2, they cannot go back because they have no home to go back to. So I will now ask Sukumar to give you a quick gist of the report. Others will speak, all of us, in a minute or two.
Yeah, what's most striking there is that even now, 2 weeks after the first spark was lit, seemingly 27th August was when the first incident happened, which kind of built up into the eruption of September 7th and 8th. It's still not clear what contributed to this flare-up. Now, people that we spoke to are very clear that there has been for at least 2-3 months a building up of animosity, that people who have lived together in fair peace and amity over generations, suddenly started having kind of mutual suspicions, and that Muslims were kind of taunted repeatedly for kind of wearing the emblems of their faith, like the skull cap and the beard, suddenly became a mark of alienness. Now, they were unable to account for that. How did that sudden shift in public mood happen? So, so there is a strong case to argue that there was political hand at work behind it. There was an orchestration going on at some level, which we are not yet able to fathom. So when the incident of August 27th happened, there were multiple interpretations of it. And even today you will find that there are multiple interpretations, multiple understandings of it. One version says that it's a case of harassment of a young girl of the Jat community. There is an equal and opposite version also, which says that it originated in harassment of a young girl from the Muslim community, and that this led to an altercation. All that we know is that 3 young men ended up dead at the end of it. Now, from there onwards, the whole situation started spiraling into a pretty vicious circle of mutual suspicion and hostility. And the key factors here are that the administration stood back. The administration, in fact, did possibly the worst things that they could in the circumstances, because on the evening of the 27th itself, the district magistrate and the superintendent of police were transferred. So there was an administrative vacuum there. Nobody knew how to deal with the kind of burgeoning possibility of violence. And by the time the new officials took over, whether they were formal instructions or informal instructions, there was clearly no real determination to intervene and to show the administrative will and political statesmanship to contain the situation. So what we had was that every day from then on, there was some little provocation or the other. On the 30th, you had a large gathering of the Muslim community in the heart of the Muzaffarnagar town, and their purpose ostensibly was to present a petition to the district magistrate saying that this hostile actions and hostile rhetoric from the other side should stop. And prohibitory orders were in place, but the crowd gathered, and then some political leaders gathered, including the local MP, Mr. Kader Rana, and the gathering became pretty huge. And the DM thought that this is potentially a difficult situation, and he came out and received the petition from the crowd. Now, this fed into the narrative of appeasement of the Muslims, that, there is prohibitory orders in place, but still the DM comes out, and the narrative there is that he joined Manch Par Aa Gaya, which was not the case at all. He actually just came out to receive the petition. So the retaliatory gathering happened on 31st, which was kind of, all about protecting the honor of the feminine honor of the community. Ma Beti Bachao, Ma Beti Bahu Bachao, Mahapanchayat, and I think this mic is a little difficult. So again, the preparations were underway for another gathering on the 7th. Now the DM says that he was unaware of the specific preparations, the location which had been chosen, and so on. He says that the community has its own kind of code, some kind of jungle telegraph kind of communication. They just make these arrangements quietly, discreetly, and nothing is publicized, and they suddenly gather at some place and the panchayat begins. But people there believe that doesn't hold water, that alibi does not hold water, because it was fairly clear that they would meet at this place near Kawal, where the first incident happened, and that the preparations were underway for cops from neighboring districts and from districts in Haryana to gather there. And of course, then the administration decided that they would not try to stop them, they would instead try and keep a close vigil over the goings on. And the administration did apparently deploy police forces at key places to keep track of who was arriving there and how many, and so on. They say they didn't see that lethal weapons were being brought in there. But once the gathering assembled, there were lethal weapons brandished, fiery speeches made, openly provocative slurs upon the minority community. And of course, that's when the whole sequence of events kind of spiraled out of control. Now again, if you read the report, there are disputed versions of what precisely happened after that. Some people say that a tractor trailer carrying some participants from the Mahapanchayat back to the village was ambushed in Jawli village, and the 6 members of the Jat community were killed and dumped into the Gang Nahar. Others say that no, they actually started the violence, and then there was retaliatory action, and some 10 people lay dead at the end of it. Now, point is that the administration has shown no determination to ascertain the precise facts and to cool the whole temperature. And it seems that there was some kind of an informal guidance from the top, from the higher level political leadership, that this should be allowed to run its course because there is a deeper political agenda that's being served. And this seems to be part of the mobilization of forces on deeply divisive lines for the next round of elections. So it's something that we have to be wary about, and we need to be prepared to blow the whistle on this whenever there is a threat of a disturbance to public peace. Thank you so much.
First of all, let me explain. I've been reporting since 1970 or something, and I've seen many riots. But again, every time I go and report on a riot or see a riot, I'm always shocked. But possibly never so much as this time. When we enter a village, we see an absolute stunning silence, a total vacuum. There is no Muslim in the Hindu village, and the Hindu houses are all locked because there are FIRs against the men, and the women lock themselves in. It's as if you are in a country where there are no human beings left at all, and that's very shocking when you first see. And then when you see the statistics, the shock takes on a very physical form. The entire villages have been purged of all Muslim presence, and that's very frightening. Of the almost 52,000 or so internally displaced persons called refugees, 700 are Hindu Dalits. The rest of them are all Muslims, and very poor Muslims. And that is very disturbing. So it is not a communal riot in that sense of two equal communities clashing with each other, back and forth, to and fro, in a city situation. That's fright number one. Fright number two is, although it also took place in the city, but the countryside is aflame, and the countryside is afraid. And that's terrible. The third is, where will these refugees go? They can't live in refugee camps run by Muslims in Karbalas and in mosques and in houses. You can't stay there forever. The government seems to have no long-term delivery. It says we will build houses for those who cannot go back. Rehabilitation is when the people can go back to the places they were evicted from. 2,000 at least of these people from one refugee camp don't want to go back at all. What is going to happen to them? What sort of a schism, a difference that we have created between two communities who have been living together in peace at least since 1947, if not for centuries? That's something very galling, very frightening, and something that the government has still not responded to in a way. Second thing I want to tell you about is that if the army were not in the villages, the bloodshed would have been more. Both the Hindus and the Muslims attribute the comparative fewer number of fatalities to the presence of the army, and even the fact that it's the army which found the bodies. The role of the army is increasing in communal violence, and yet the army, and Mr. Mohan Ram will speak on it further, is not being allowed to do its work fully as it should. The collector seems to have no idea of the powers of our army in a situation where it comes to the assistance of the civil government in a situation of riot. The third I want to do is in terms of further rehabilitation. And the National Integration Council is going to meet on the 23rd. I'm a member of that, and it is one of our recommendations. We are going to ask the government, and we ask it today, in no uncertain terms, that the communal and targeted violence bill, in whatever acceptable form there is, should be brought forth. If you don't like the form that the NSA created in 2011, it's open to negotiations. But bring a law which can read the ground situation, which can preempt and prevent violence, which has a pattern and a template in place to ensure relief, rehabilitation, reparation, which has issues about command responsibility, where the police or the official who doesn't work, who allows who has impunity, who's seeing the violence in front of his own eyes and doesn't do anything, who goes to a stage at a very violent rally where inflammatory speeches are being made and weapons are being branded and does nothing about it, that action can be taken about it. These are some of the issues we mentioned. Let me quickly go through also the suggestions, which are, we demand a judicial inquiry by sitting judge of the Supreme Court. The CV bill I've already taken. Legal and mandatory duties be instituted under the bill for rescue, relief, rehabilitation and reparation for the victims of criminal violence. Immediate arrest of the political prisoners. This is ridiculous. Television is showing the criminals sitting in assembly. Surely you can't arrest them inside the assembly, but they have to enter the assembly through a common road. What prevents you from arresting them when they come back? Many of them were available and were giving many television interviews, but the police did not want to arrest them. So that is something that the police should do. What about the man who broadcast the terrible video, a false video of 2 years ago in a different country altogether? I mean, if there is a crime, that is the crime. And still no action seems to have taken. Another thing we found out was, we went to camps after camps. There is no government present in the camp. They say we are allowing the Muslims to run the camps so that it brings about healing. That is a lot of, whatever you call it. Government presence must be seen in camps. There must be a lady doctor, there must be a pediatrician, or even one general doctor and a nurse. There should be somebody to note down FIR. There must be help. There must be a visible state presence. These people have been left to their own devices. This will not do. This is no way of bringing about peace to the region. We'll be happy to answer questions later, but
I just want to make a couple of points. Number one, what we saw in Kutba and other areas was the complete removal of the Muslim population. Some of their houses burned, but the better houses kept aside for reoccupation. And it would seem from what we heard from the Muslim refugees, they said we will not go back to our villages. That is, in the town Kutba, which has been reported on in the press, we found that the Muslims had fled and only the Hindus were there. And when we talked to them in the camps, the Muslims said very clearly, we're not going back. In other words, the situation akin to ethnic cleansing had come in, where you would have holy Hindu villages and holy Muslim villages. I think this is extremely unfortunate. And when we spoke to the DM, he gave us no concrete assurance of what he was going to do. He just said that their relief camps were community camps. But that's not true actually. If you have a relief camp which is actually a community camp, it should incorporate all communities. Otherwise, what you are doing is you are causing segregation on communal lines in terms of relief. Another thing which is important to remember is that of the many people who were charge sheeted, they were not captured in time. Then this idea that the relief camp should be run by the community again is against the secular idea that whoever wants can come and stay in the relief camp. But if it has a stamp of a particular religion, that can't happen. What I'm trying to say is that there are indications, we have yet to prove it from an inquiry, but there are indications that certain directions were given to the administration. The last thing I want to say is, the fact that the Chief Minister took 7 days to come to Muzaffarnagar is itself an indication of how seriously the SP government took this matter. Which is why we've made the demand for a sitting Supreme Court judge to decide on this, because he or she would be much less likely to be influenced by this. But I think it's very important that you bring out this ethnic cleansing, this trying to change the demographic picture of the environment, because this is obviously a bigger and darker game and needs to be exposed. Thank you.
I just want to add, and then we'll open it to everyone, is the other thing is, which has been pointed out, but I just want to reassert, that the role of the police is extremely suspect in that area. Apart from the role of the politician, the role of the police and or from the SP to the SHO. When we went there, we did see army, we didn't see any police at all. We had a state government that was completely absent from the field, as has been pointed out, and we had trauma and fear and absolute fright spread across the entire district in the villages and the towns and the kasbas. And you found that there was no effort 7 days after the event by the state administration or by any political party to go and sit with the people and try to get the communities together. Question.